Welcome back. You're still with The Nation at 9. U.S. President Donald J. Trump will address Congress today, and many are waiting to see if he breaks his silence on the racial hate crimes that have seen a spike after he became president. The gruesome Kansas shooting where an Indian immigrant, Suhasini Haider, was killed and 2 others were wounded by a U.S. Navy veteran has left the Indian-American community shocked and enraged. Meanwhile, Srinivas's body arrived today here in his hometown, Hyderabad. Foreign Secretary S. Shankar is also supposed to leave for the U.S. tomorrow. He's expected to raise the Kansas shooting with U.S. officials during his visit, while reports say that there has been a spurt in hate crimes against immigrants in the U.S. Ever since Trump took over. The president himself has maintained a surprising silence on the rise in hate crimes in his country. Will he break his silence? The big question. And usually Twitter-happy, Donald Trump hasn't said a word till now. We'll discuss profiling and anti-immigrant phobia in the U.S. after Trump came to power, and also the fact that him staying quiet, really, is it by design, or is it that the U.S. president is so busy that he cannot tweet his usual early morning tweets condemning a racial crime or a hate crime? We'll see that after the story we file. Let's take a look at the facts of the story.
The final return of the son, grief, disbelief, and the demand for answers.
Memories are so fresh that what I'm doing right now still feels like a dream. I wish it is a dream. It's hard to believe that he's not with me, he's not with us anymore.
Srinivas Kuchibotla made America his home more than 10 years ago. Last week, he was shot dead for being an outsider. "Get out of my country," shouted the killer before firing. But the US government under Trump hasn't even admitted that it was a hate crime.
The whole incident is under investigation, and whether it is a hate crime or not, it is still being investigated.
On the streets of Kansas, hundreds marched in support, condemning the racial hate that killed. More than $1 million donated to his family and 2 others who were injured.
The world waits for President Donald Trump's address. This, even as Indian Foreign Secretary Shiv Shankar will be in the United States of America to engage the top leadership. The big question is, will there be a mention of the increase in hate crimes and the attack on Indians by President Trump?
Indian Foreign Secretary S. Shankar travels to the US tomorrow. The concerns of the Indian American community in the face of rising racial attacks top his priority.
I think we need to take it up very strongly with the US government, particularly on the question of whether an atmosphere or a milieu is being created.
इन लोगों को भड़काना, एक दूसरे से रंग भेद, नस्ल भेद, धर्म भेद की राजनीति और उस तरीके की एक भावनाओं पर आधारित ट्रंप की सरकार रही है, तो वहां से कोई बयान नहीं आएगा, इसमें कोई आश्चर्य की बात नहीं।
The answers and part of the blame lie with this man. US President Trump hasn't even deigned to condemn the mindless killing. As he prepares to address the Congress, will he address the issue that is dividing and bleeding his country? Bureau Report, NewsX.
Joining us tonight on The Nation at 9 is Shiv Shankar Mukerjee. He's a former diplomat. He's right here with me in the studio. Suhasini Haider joins us, Strategic and Foreign Affairs Editor of The Hindu. Vijay Chauthaiwala, he's the in-charge of Foreign Affairs Department of the BJP, joins us, as well as C.R. Kesavan, National Spokesperson of the Congress Party. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to introduce one more guest. He's going to join us via Skype from Indiana University. He's a professor of political science, Professor Sumit Ganguly. He'll be joining us in just a bit. Professor Shiv Shankar, I beg your pardon, Ambassador Mukerjee, let me start with you right now. Indians and Indian news channels, of course, suddenly picked up on the immigrant fear in the U.S. only after an Indian was killed. But this has been going on ever since Trump started campaigning, after he became president. Now, do you think that anyone is really surprised at the fact that Donald Trump hasn't mentioned a word about this killing, which is in all probability a hate crime?
Well, about President Trump not mentioning it, well, he has been under pressure in the American media itself and across whole shades of American liberal opinion for, you know, a whole series of actions which have tended to polarize an already quite polarized society. The ban on Muslims, anti-immigration rhetoric and executive orders and so on and so forth. He has been under pressure for, he has been accused that his policies have led to an upsurge in anti-Semitic incidents and so on. And so this incident, which of course exercises us more because it's the killing of an Indian, a young Indian.
Who was mistaken for a Middle Eastern Muslim.
Well, racists do not go, you know, this is, racism in this particular case is a question of color, really.
Yeah.
I mean, he would not have said, get out of my country to someone who was white.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Unlikely,
He wouldn't know whether this was Middle Eastern or Pakistani or an Indian or a nation from some other country. He's a racist who, you know, judges his victim on the basis of the color.
Right.
So I don't know in today's speech whether Donald Trump is going to mention this. He did say something about the anti-Semitism incidents and criticized it in one of his speeches, I think, yesterday.
Well, I believe the words were bad, very bad, quote unquote.
So, but the fact is that although racist incidents have occurred routinely in America and in most countries in the world, race is a fact of life that the human condition lives with. The fact is that it is natural for not just us but the world that looks at America and Americans themselves, it is but natural for them to link it to the kind of policies that Donald Trump is following,
right,
to his own background as a person who is xenophobic, bigoted, and so on. So to link the two is I think, it's not a question of right and wrong. I think it's entirely natural.
Okay, I want to go to Suhasini Haider next. Suhasini, as Ambassador Mukerjee mentioned right now, this is not the first person of color to have been murdered in the U.S. He's probably not going to be the last, given the state of affairs in that country. But what do you think it means, really? The kind of xenophobia, whether you want to call it xenophobia, you want to call it anti-immigration sentiment or anti-immigrant sentiment or Islamophobia or what have you. Do you believe that when Indians who were not Muslim were mistaken for Middle Eastern Muslims and shot really brutally, India suddenly woke up and said, look, perhaps there's a problem there. Do you believe that this was coming in any case, because the kind of campaign he ran, very divisive, the kind of administrative actions has been taken, the kind of cabinet he has with white nationalists in the White House. Is anyone surprised this happened?
Look, there's no question that the kind of politics we are seeing in the last few months, particularly in the US, but also in other countries in the world, the kind of very hyper-nationalistic, jingoistic, anti-immigrant, Islamophobic, xenophobic sort of politics that you are seeing is going to lead to an atmosphere in which a lot of people will be targeted. I remember being on your show on NewsX a few weeks ago when there was practically jubilation in India when they heard that Pakistan might be added to the list of countries that were going to be, that were on this travel ban. And I think that was short-sighted, because the truth is that not only does India stand to lose from policies that involve, say, immigration or H-1B visas, or the IT industry where, you know, it will become America first and hire American, buy American, but also from the general atmosphere that is created by these sentiments. But to blame the government directly for this in the US, I don't think that's quite fair. As the ambassador said, you know, this is not the first racist attack inside the US. This is not the first time Indian students or Indian immigrants have been targeted. But I think what it does is it focuses everyone's mind on the kind of messaging we've been seeing coming out of the US in the last few years.
So Suhasini, of course, I agree with you and the ambassador when you say that you cannot hold the government directly responsible. But there are, of course, questions to be asked about Donald Trump's silence. Now, he's a Twitter-happy sort of a president. He's been lying low. Perhaps that's a strategy by his aides, because we are being led to believe that the less he goes on Twitter, the less controversy he generates. But don't you think this was one particular attack? The White House could have condemned at least, but they haven't done so till now. Do you think that raises concerns about him not even having mentioned it till now? All right, I believe Suhasini's line was disconnected. I'll ask that question again in a bit. But let me go across now to Vijay Chautaiwala. He's the in charge of Foreign Affairs Department of the BJP now. Mr. Chaudhariwala, I'm going to quote to you a line written by an Indian American. I'm not going to name him because this is part of a different publication, USA Today. And he writes, and I quote him now, look no further than the Republican Hindu coalition to see how seamlessly Hindu nationalism dovetails with white nationalism's campaign against Islam. Now, the reason I've quoted only these two lines from a rather large article, or a big article really, is because the heading says, after the Kansas attack, we are all Muslims here. This is a Hindu immigrant or a Hindu Indian American saying that, look, this is all part of the white nationalism undertone that we've seen the Trump campaign undergo, really. And this was to be expected here. The coalition that he speaks about was jubilant after Trump won, and they said this is the best thing that could have happened to the fight against terror, the war on terror, anti-radical Islamic terror. Do you think that we were too premature, or we jumped the gun in, or many people were, in hailing Trump's election as a great victory for India, or as a great victory for anti-terror forces?
I think let us not mix up the issues. One issue is definitely the killing of Srinivas in Kansas,
Sure.
and that is certainly a hate crime. I would have appreciated, and we would have been more comfortable if President Donald Trump or White House would have condemned it and strictly labeled it as a hate crime. But it does not mean that entire US mainstream is anti-immigrants or anti-Indians. So let us not mix up the issues and try to draw a very one-sided conclusions.
No, I'm not saying the entire US is anti-immigrant. I'm saying that the lack of a response from the White House on what is, like you said very clearly, a hate crime, racially motivated hate crime, doesn't that bother, won't that bother the Indian diaspora in the US, many of whom are Republicans and are quite, well, avowedly Republican?
No, it does bother. It does bother any person who is having a good sense, and people are worried about it. People are always worried in certain states about the hate crimes, in certain university campuses, and in some areas they were feeling more safe and more liberal atmosphere was there. So this is an ongoing phenomenon. The talks of few people in the last few months has definitely propelled it, and diaspora in general is more worried today.
All right. C.R. Kesavan, let me come to you right now. I have about 5 to 6 minutes left, so I'm going to rifle through my guests right now. Mr. Kesavan, your take on the lack of a response from the White House, either the White House or the President himself, who I said is a very Twitter-happy president, but no word till now from him. He could have easily come out and said that, look, don't shoot innocent brown people, or words to that effect, but he's too busy right now, it seems.
No. See, Athar, you can't blame the government, but what is very unsettling is this, deafening silence of Mr. Trump. And what causes concern is the selective outrage. Even yesterday, he was talking about the mayhem which happened in Chicago where people were shot. But let me just ask you a, hypothetical question. What if in Kansas, the person who died was white and the person who was the killer was a non-white? Would Mr. Trump kept the same silence? And that is the problem which we are facing with the administration in America, because I think it's the kind of bigoted, racist, divisive atmosphere which is permeated there is definitely fueling these crimes. And you remember there have been incidents before, like Suhasini ji was mentioning. The Gurudwara attack which happened in 2013, which was very unfortunate, which was condemned by Obama. But here, when these things happen, the president, who has to play the healer, who has to, kind of calm nerves, is keeping quite an unfortunate part here. Athar, is the anti-minority, anti-immigrant rhetoric which is building up and the violence which is happening is lost out on Trump, because Mr. Trump's, son-in-law is a minority, he's a Jew, his daughter is a professed Jew, and his wife is an immigrant. And look at the, not just the irony, look at the hypocrisy. in a land of immigrants. And I think, it's very unfortunate, and the question which comes to my mind is what the unfortunate wife of Mr. Srinivas asked today. She said, what action is this government taking? If the American government has a conscience, I think they have to answer her and her,
all right.
The collective fears of the Indian diaspora.
Quickly then, I want to go across to Professor Sumit Ganguly, who joins us via Skype. He's a professor of political science at Indiana University. Professor Ganguly, somebody said, I think in India, a politician who I rarely agree with, but I had to agree with this particular statement. He said, I won't name him, of course, he said that while you can't blame either the president or the government or the administration directly for any hate crime or a racial crime that happens anywhere in the US, that would be naive to do so. But there is this feeling that a president or this president has created an ethos of hating immigrants or being suspicious of immigrants, and these shootings or these hate crimes were only the result that could have been expected. There is at least that correlation, if not more. I want to know your views on this, Professor Ganguly.
In my mind, that the president and his closest advisors have created a climate in which it is acceptable to demonize immigrants, to express hostility towards immigrants, particularly recent immigrants to this country who are of a different skin color. And to that extent, I certainly hold the president responsible for the terrible incident that took place in Kansas. His administration cannot elide over the responsibility that it bears, because they have created a climate of widespread hostility and have rendered it acceptable to express all manner of disgust with immigrants. And they have legitimized a certain form of political discourse. And unless the president forthrightly addresses this matter in the joint session of Congress tonight, I'm afraid our fears will be underscored in the worst kind of way.
What are the chances, 30 seconds to you, Ambassador, what are the chances that Trump's going to mention this attack in the Congress?
Well, I agree completely with Sumit. The fact that any society evolves and certain impulses in society follow the perceived impulses of the leadership. At the present moment, there is no doubt that all over the West, particularly in the US, the political leadership has made the covert racism present in many, many people, it has given them the oxygen to make it overt.
Right.
So there has been, even after Brexit, for instance, there were incidents of crimes against immigrants, against Eastern Europeans and people of color in the UK. So there he's absolutely right. I mean, we don't have to link this to this specific incident and find some legal connection, but there's absolutely no doubt that this contributes to the people who already are racists into actually converting their thoughts into racist action.
And that's, of course,
and as far as President Trump's message to the Congress, whether he should mention it or not, the fact is, of course, he should. But whether he does or not, the fact is that his position, the perception that among liberals, that includes myself, is that he won't really be meaning it.
Of course.
He will do it because it's a political necessity, perhaps. But the fact that he is, well, his policies resemble the colors of the American flag, red, white, and blue. His supporters are rednecks, blue-collar workers, and white supremacists.
All right, that's an analogy I've heard the first time, but I think that fits correctly. Suhasini Haider, I'll give you the last word. One second. I'll give Suhasini the last word. If Suhasini can hear me right now, can you, Suhasini, if you can, please nod? I don't think Suhasini can hear me right now, so I will give the last word then to CR Kesavan. Very quickly, 30 seconds, I will wrap up.
Athar, I just want to add one word to what.
Yes.
Athar, I just want to add to what Mr. Mukerjee said. Trump leads the party of Lincoln, and Lincoln talked about, appealing to the better angels of human nature. Unfortunately, Trump is appealing to the darker angels of human nature in America, and which is, which is the reflection of what you see now. And it's so unfortunate.
All right, CR Kesavan, we have no more time, unfortunately. I would have loved to continue on this because I have so many questions. I had a very good panel. Unfortunately, I have no more time right now. Professor Ganguly, I thank you for your time. Ambassador Mukerjee, Suhasini Haider, Mr. Chautaiwala, and CR Kesavan. That's the time we have on The Nation at 9 tonight. I've been Athar Khan. Have a good night.